Okay, so hi everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, which is Reimagining Work, Transforming Work Culture Through Everyday Leadership. My name's Rosalind Munro. I'm the Director of Community Legal Centres Queensland, and it's my pleasure to firstly acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we're holding today's webinar in Meanjin, Brisbane. They are the Turrbal and Jagera people. We pay our deepest respects to elders past, present and emerging. As this webinar is being viewed by people across Queensland and Australia, we also pay respect to the traditional owners throughout the country. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional custodians of the land in Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture. We acknowledge the stories, traditions and living cultures of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and commit to fostering a culture of learning from and working with First Nations people in the spirit of reconciliation and access to justice. We extend a warm welcome to any First Nations people listening today. I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Mandy Neralik, who will introduce some concepts and perspectives to help workers in non-leadership roles to move in from a disempowered stance to promote a positive change, empowerment and engagement in the workplace. Mandy is a clinical psychologist in private practice, and this webinar forms part of our mental health and wellbeing capacity building series, which is supported by a grant from the QCF. I'll let Mandy tell you a bit more about herself when I hand over in a moment, but before I do that, just a bit of quick housekeeping. Today's webinar is being recorded and we'll have the recording available to download early next week. Also to let you know, this is a 90-minute session today, and we know that sometimes you're a bit strapped for time, so if you can only stay for part of it, you'll be able to catch up on the recording a bit later on if that's what you need to do. A link for the PowerPoints has been emailed out to everyone who's registered and can be downloaded from our website and are also available from the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel. We encourage you to ask questions. Simply type your questions into the question box on the control panel and we will read your question out. We'll hold questions until the end or until Mandy sort of stops the presentation and pauses perhaps for questions, but feel free to type them in as you think about them. So I'll hand over to Mandy now and talk to you again at the end of the session. Thanks, Mandy.
Okay, thanks, Ros, and thanks for inviting me back to speak. I've spoken, I think this is the fourth presentation I've done for this group, and I'm really happy to return. I'm going to jump right in actually to starting the topic. I'm going to move my cursor down here. And I'm going to sort of offer a few slides first as a little bit of a prequel to sort of set a bit of a tone as well before I do a little bit of a summary about what we're going to look at today. And I suppose I'm doing this because as I was going through the talk today, I think I changed the focus just a little bit. And I'm hoping that it'll be a positive little shift, you know, nothing too major, but just a positive, just a different little way to sort of look at leadership and how I'm going to deliver this talk. So firstly, I just wanted to kind of just raise this idea of you know, transforming work and what it is that needs transforming. And when I spoke to Carly, you know, when she was organizing this, you know, she really talked about toxicity in the workplace and what this means. So, you know, we can sort of say this word that this is toxic, but you know, what is it? Is it people? Is it practices? Is it systems? Is it paradigms? Culture, work culture, and I think it's a complex of all of these things. But what we mean by what's toxic is that something within the workplace is harmful, unpleasant, unhealthy, all the way through to sickening, you know, poisonous or deadly. You know, it's quite dramatic, but toxic is a pretty dramatic word. And there's something kind of pervasive and insidious about some of these things. It's like all of a sudden, you know, we can't quite put our finger on it sometimes, or it's hard to really define. So, but there's a sense that something's not quite right here, you know, intuitively, something's very wrong, and maybe it's been very wrong for a little while and it's just sort of crept in to the culture. So what needs transforming is toxic workplaces, and we need to have a clearer image and a language about what it is that's not working. And what else might need transforming are these notions and ideals and possibilities for leadership, so who or how, or who can lead, or how do we lead, or what do we do to lead. And I think we have this idea, probably promoted by the leaders in the highest realms of office across the world, not being the greatest role models for leadership, and we might think that only certain people can be leaders, and that leadership is hierarchical, and it's about narcissism, and it's about power over, and leaders are just badly behaved, right? But I believe that we all have the potential to be leaders. And I really like this quote by Bridget Delaney in The Guardian. This is a recent article that she wrote in The Guardian. It's just a nice little tidy quote, that conversations about character, about treating everyone with integrity, empathy, justice, and compassion have not been a feature of public life for a long time. We want there to be virtue in leadership, but we don't want to do anything in society to create virtuous people. We just expect people to come to leadership fully formed. And so, within our small everyday lives, I think we can really start to shift that a little bit and find within ourselves the capacity to lead, even within, our small communities, our families, our work environments as well. And actually, given that the current examples of those in high leadership are really lacking, I feel like it's really an opportunity to take a stand, because if you see something's not quite right, then I think we must try. We must try and make a difference and step into these roles of leadership, even in small and everyday ways. Okay, so that's my little rant. So what else needs transforming? And this is this idea that our inner world is separate from our outer world, that we as individuals are cloistered from the world at large. And I think psychology has a bit of a way to, or some reevaluating, I should say, to do about how we can remain relevant by including, individual healing and world healing together. So I think the events of the last couple of years, right, has really shown us that we can't really separate ourselves from what happens outside of our kind of happy little world here in this country or in our community. So this is about changing the way, or transforming the way we think about others, and that we are all connected, and we're not separate, and we don't have to compete. And then there's this other idea of transforming this idea of work and soul as being separate. And I'm not saying that work has to be something that is our soul focus and life's passion, but we can certainly inject work with soul, with a different attitude that kind of promotes a more caring and meaningful way of being at work. So Thomas More says, finding the right work is like discovering your own soul in the world. So we can live our souls out in our work as well. And if we kind of looked at work as having a soul, I think we could certainly change the way that we engage with work, right? And this last little kind of bit that I want to do before I kind of get into the crux of everything is that we need to transform our minds, or really engage in new ways of thinking and perceiving, especially around power and leadership, and include more imagination, dialogue, and embodiment. So again, more soul in the way that we think and we have conversations and engage with other people. So I just wanted to put this little question here as well. You don't have to come up with an answer straight away, but kind of just let it hang there with you. How would I be, think, and act if I recognize that everyone and everything has a soul? And imagine how our leaders would be and think and act if they could really see that everything that we have within us and outside of us is soulful. Okay. Any comments about that would be really welcome as well. I think it's a little bit, maybe a bit of a different way to introduce this topic, but something I feel passionate about. So today, I suppose I said I kind of twigged the framework of the talk today. And I think, reimagining leadership to transform and heal unhealthy work culture might be a more interesting way to approach this topic. So today what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a bit of a review of some of the talks that I've done before that I feel like can really be helpful for us or everyone, regardless of whether or not we want to engage in leadership. And I call this our personal responsibility, foundational skills and resources that are going to help us navigate change and stress and challenge no matter what. And then I'm going to sort of introduce this new paradigm of leadership that's supported by new thinking and imagination. And I'm going to talk about leadership in terms of archetypal imagination. So this is really connecting into a different kind of energy that can help us, help guide us, I suppose, to be leaders in a new age, in a new way. And then I'm going to go into, I suppose this will be the body of the talk today, really how we can embody the archetypes of the warrior, the healer, the visionary, and the teacher to become leaders at work. Okay, so let's get into it. Now, I'm talking, this is the review section, and from what I'm told, that all the other talks that I've given are also linked, so you can access them. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of these things, but if you're interested in any of these and you haven't watched the talks before, I think they're available to you. So I'm going to talk about our personal responsibilities in terms of becoming aware and self-aware, knowing how to self-regulate and transform strong emotions, and that we must be able to communicate our thoughts, emotions, needs, desires, and limits. And this is not negotiable. And that sounds a little harsh, but it's like we need to be responsible for these things within the workplace, okay, regardless of whether or not we take on leadership roles or not. Okay, so first up, awareness and self-awareness. This is really where we are investing time and energy to better understand ourselves, others, and our world. So this means that we're really getting an understanding of our mental, emotional, and behavioral habits and patterns, and what our belief systems are that we operate under or through, any old hurts or wounds or traumas that we might be living with, and any shadow material. So shadow material is any kind of qualities or characteristics about ourselves maybe that we don't like so much, but that we maybe repress a little bit, but will come out, you know, maybe sometimes least expectedly. And any conditioning. So these are, you know, ways of being that we've been told that this is the proper way to do things, this is the improper way to do things. And we're doing it just because that's just the way we've been told or learned how to do it. And by understanding this, it's also about understanding how these things impact others in the outer world. And, you know, building this capacity to be aware means that we are really overcoming the ignorance and naivety. So we can all be ignorant, we can all be naive, but as soon as we recognize that, you know, there's something's missing here in my awareness, I think it's our responsibility to start to really explore that in a deeper way. And so rituals of self-reflection and contemplation are essential here, so that we can do this formally through practices like meditation and being mindful and prayer or journaling, even psychotherapy, or, you know, talking with friends and mentors, peer support groups, even being creative, you know, through the creative arts. But I suppose what we're aiming for eventually is using those things as practice so that we can eventually just be living with as much awareness as possible, and engaging and interacting with other people with as much awareness as possible, you know, live and online. Alrighty. And when we're got that capacity to be aware and self-aware, we can really start to question what's going on. So, you know, what is the truth here? You know, what's really happening? And this is really important when we're sort of trying to sort of unravel what's actually unhealthy or toxic in the workplace, you know, being able to see things really clearly and really being able to see what you're bringing to the situation or not bringing, and really understanding the situation beyond any conditioning or beyond what you're told is true or right or proper. And this is, of course, you know, questioning something without being paranoid or obsessive or having conspiracy kind of theories. All right, so And then we're also personally responsible to be able to self-regulate and transform our own emotions and our experiences. So beyond being aware and self-aware, this is about processing what we're aware of and change. So this is not just about understanding, it's about making a difference or making changes within our life. And to do this, it's really important that we understand what's going on in our nervous system. And in other talks, I've talked pretty extensively about the window of tolerance. And I've just got a little image there. I don't think it's an exact image, that might be in another talk, but it's very, very similar. And this kind of really is a helpful model, I find, to really understand how energy and emotions can move through us and across time, say across a day, and fluctuate. You know, our energy isn't stagnant and stable generally, it shifts and moves. And so generally when we're feeling calm and happy and contented and stable, we are kind of within our window of tolerance or within our capacity to handle stress and challenge. As we approach that top end, we're moving into maybe a little bit of excitement or stress, but that's okay as long as we're within that window. And as we go down the bottom, that blue line, we're approaching low energy kind of emotions and energy. Things can be like relaxation and sleepiness even, but it can drop down into or move up out of those windows into more unhelpful states, I suppose, if it's just in our everyday life. Things like panic, things like rage, things like heightened anxiety, or down the bottom it can be things like apathy, boredom, and depression, right? So when we're looking to self-regulate or build the skills to self-regulate and transform strong emotions, that really gives us the capacity to move from being reactive and to reactive to stressful situations that might put us into panic or make us kind of withdraw into depression, and make us or help us really stay with the stressful situation with a sense of calm and safety still, but move through it and really stretch our capacity to handle more and more situations that we might ordinarily not be able to handle. So what we're doing here is, or what we're responsible for here, is building our resources so that we can meet stressful situations, which are essential when we are wanting to take more leadership roles at work. So this is about being safe, but not too safe. But we have to build our skills to do that. So that's our responsibility. So it's like, if I'm always getting nervous, say, when I'm doing a talk, or if I'm always shying away from something, then how can I do build the skills, or what skills do I need to make it easier for me to do those things? So I tend to suggest that we need to get at least one body-based practice, or one breath-based practice, some cognitive resources, some relationship resources, some community resources, and creative resources. We need to be able to tap into a range of resources, and this can take a lifetime to build, but we need to do that consistently, because as we need more and more challenge, I think we need more and more resources, right? Okay, and we're also responsible for being able to communicate our thoughts and ideas and emotions, needs and desires and limits. And we do this because we want to be in connection with other people. We want to be in relationship with other people, but we have to be able to do that with an awareness of our own, say, biases, our own belief systems, our own projections, our own judgments. And so when we're communicating in this way, we're also really conscious of sharing, our thoughts and feelings and ideas without dumping, without blaming or shaming or being passive aggressive. And so what can help here is just being conscious of our boundary style. And I think I've done a whole talk on boundaries, and that if we do sort of fall short in the way that we've communicated or we've behaved, then we need to be willing to redo, the way that we've approached somebody or repair a relationship. So communication is also about verbals and non-verbals, and making sure they match and they're congruent, and that we can sort of validate other people's experiences without enmeshment, without over-identification, or without withdrawal as well. Okay, so I'm going to if anyone's got any kind of comments about that or questions about that, you know, pop them into the chat. But I want to sort of just take a moment where we're just kind of revisiting a little bit of a mindful moment of breath work and how we can really tap into this capacity to change our emotional state, our energetic state through imagination and through breath. And this is just a little exercise that I'm going to do with you all or guide you through that'll take maybe 3 minutes. I'm hoping not too much. It's very easy to get carried away with this sort of exercise, so I'm going to try and keep it shorter. I'm just going to take a drink here. And if you want to put your pens down, if you're writing, if you're doing multiple things, if you want to just take a few moments just to focus and sit. And if you've got a chair back, lean back into the back of the chair so your spine is there, and place your feet on the floor. And this is a really nice position to be receptive, yeah? And if you want to close your eyes for this exercise, you can close your eyes. But if you like that image on the screen, you can kind of just, you know, half close your eyes so it's a little fuzzy so that you can keep your eyes a little bit open. And just notice your body settling. And just start to breathe and be conscious of your breath, right? So we're always breathing, but just being conscious of the breath coming in and the breath going out. Feeling your body sitting, feeling the support of the chair, the floor, just the breath coming in and the breath going out. Now, I want you to imagine now that in front of you is like a big dial, you know, it could be like a round dial that you can turn left to right. So just bring that into your imagination, and it's kind of numbered from 0 to 100. And those numbers represent how much energy you can bring into your system, right? Where 0 is no energy and 100 is full throttle, right? But I want you to also imagine on this dial that at around 30 and at around 70, that's kind of as far as it goes consciously. And that below that and above that is what your body will do automatically if it needs to go into high alert or retreat. Okay. So just imagine taking that dial and just moving it, say, between 30 and 70, till you kind of get a sense of where you might be energetically. Are you more towards 30? Are you more towards 70? And just start to see if you can match your breath with that. So wherever you are on that dial, you know, what does your breath feel like if it was at 30% or 30 notch mark, or the 50 notch mark, or the 70 notch mark? And I want you to now experiment with changing that a little bit. So if you're at the lower end, turn the dial up and bring more energy into your system by bringing more breath into your system. And if you're more at the upper end, turn that dial down and notice what changes in your breath. Maybe you breathe more into your belly. Maybe there's more attention to the out breath. Turning it up, maybe you notice more breath in the upper chest. Maybe the pace of the breath changes. And I want you to be experimental here of just turning that dial a little up and down and see what feels kind of good for you. What feels pleasurable, what feels enjoyable even. And notice how you've got the power to do that. You can bring more energy into your system, or you can release energy and let more energy out of your system, depending on the need. Okay. Now you can release that image of the dial. I know some people tend to put their hand up and start to mimic that, so you can release your hand as well. And just return to the breath and just notice how that feels in the body. And I'm just going to invite you at any time where you're feeling like something emotionally or energetically doesn't feel balanced enough or pleasurable enough or right enough for you, that you can always turn back to that and bring more energy in or release energy out of your system. Okay. And now we're going to return. So come back to feeling your self sitting in the chair. If you've closed your eyes, then open your eyes. Yeah, blink them open, look around you. And just notice how you feel. And if you want to put a comment into the chat about how helpful that was, or not helpful, if you didn't find it very helpful, that's fine too. Just a little comment there. It's always interesting for me to see how people are receiving those sorts of exercises, and we'll continue. I think that was a little longer than 3 minutes, by the way. Okay, so now this is about reimagining leadership then. So we're going into this phase, like how can we reimagine leadership for a new age and a new world? And you know, I think it's easy, you know, people resist change. I mean, everybody resists change. Change is hard, and we want things to go back to normal or be different, but we don't want to always change things about ourselves, or we don't want to be involved, right? But that's actually not possible. If we want change, we need to be part of that change. And I think it was Mahatma Gandhi, and I won't probably quote him correctly, but you know, it's literally be the change that you want in the world. So how can I embody being a leader in my everyday mundane life, which requires change, for a new age and a new world? And it's this idea that I can hold the need for change and radical acceptance at the same time. So this isn't about being overly critical of yourself or other people. It can be that, you know, this is a situation now. I can accept that this is how it is, but I also know that things need to be different. So there's tension in that, there's energy in that. And it's that little space at the top of the window of tolerance, or right at the edge of your window of tolerance. That's where change happens, and that's where leaders step in, okay? And we can embody a new archetype for leadership that isn't about narcissism and isn't about power over and isn't about bad behavior, right? And this will include new thinking, that includes imagination, dialogue, embodiment, and soul. So let's take a look at that. Now, there's a bit of a chunky quote here by Tyson Yunkaporta, who's written a book, Sand Talk, which, I don't know, I highly recommend everybody to read that book several times, because it'll take you a few times to read it, I think, to grasp it. But, you know, he's in one of his chapters, he talks about this discouragement to lead, really, and this need for a compliant and focused workforce and soldiers generally. And I'm just going to read this quote out, because it says a lot. So inspiration is something that has been relegated to the arts rather than the sciences, although stories of eureka moments in scientific discovery are still celebrated. Deep engagement, encompassing mind, body, heart, and spirit, has been replaced by a dogged ethic of commitment to labor, enthusiastic compliance with discipline imposed by authority. While it may be proven that internal motivation is more productive than external pressure, the uncertain and unsettling sources of this inner power are threatening to hierarchies. So intrinsic control methods of organization are generally ignored in both education and the workplace. So I suppose he's saying here that the system really isn't set up for us to kind of lead, but I suppose it's up to us in this new age and this new world to really rattle that a little. Can't wait, actually. And part of this is that we need to create a new mind that really values science and art, logical thinking and imagination, and also values mind, body, spirit, and soul. So all aspects of our being, not just, you know, our mental facilities. And Tyson Yunkaporta also talks about, and this, I love the language of this, kinship mind, story mind, dreaming mind, ancestor mind, and pattern mind, which are more beautiful ways of saying that, you know, where we have to be connected in the way that we think. You know, stories are a great way to share information. Symbolism and metaphor is a great way for us to, you know, have deeper understandings about what's going on. This is ancestor mind is about deep time, you know, that we need to remember, you know, our ancestors and pay homage to our ancestors, and we will become ancestors ourselves. So, you know, past, present, and future are all connected, and that, you know, how things are related, this pattern mind. And also that we can't ignore context when we are looking to lead and lead in a new world. So this is as opposed to reductionist and hierarchical reasoning, which has kind of really governed the way that we work and the way that we teach our kids. So contextual reasoning is about verbal, non-verbal, oral, and written communication and enactment. And it's about making sure that there's a common understanding and consensus and dialogue in context, as opposed to, you know, that top-down decision-making that often happens out of context. And I know lots of people get frustrated by decisions being made and it doesn't really make sense, right, for the situation that you're working in. And we also need to know why we're doing something, you know, so that when we're working, we're connected to meaning rather than just, you know, following orders or a script, or just like, this is just the way that we have to do it. This is the system that we're working under and I have no choice. Okay, and so what I'm proposing today is that archetypal imagination can embody or encompass some of that type of thinking. And for those of you who aren't familiar with archetypes, you know, archetypes are these, I suppose, cross-culturally understood models and ideals that are held in the collective psyche. So there's consensus already about archetypes. So typically we don't really need to explain too much about archetypal models. We can, you know, for example, you know, the mother archetype, we don't really need to study what a mother is. There's a part of us that knows, right? Or what else, like a dog archetype, you know, we don't need to study what a dog is. There's a part of it that knows immediately what dog is, right? And James Hollis talks about archetypes really beautifully as being energy-filled images that are symbolic, metaphoric, mythic, so they're connected to story, and they're largely unconscious. So we don't have to think about them, operating using archetypes, you know, out of our conscious knowledge. So we can make them conscious by making, as we start to think about this new leadership model. So archetypes are either negative nor positive, but they can hold light and shadow attributes. They're neither male or female, although they can hold the energy of masculine and feminine qualities. And they don't always have to be human, so they can be animals and things as well. And when we're connected to archetypal imagination, this really helps us connect to something greater, because we're using our imagination, we're using symbolic thinking, and it's inherently spiritual. And I don't mean religious when I say spiritual, although that's, you know, religiosity isn't precluded, but there is a sense that there is something greater, right? And I think that's really what's lacking perhaps in many of our leaders, is this connection to spirit or something greater than ourselves. So I'm going to put forward kind of like an archetypal collective that we can maybe tap into to reimagine leadership. And this is based on Angelos Arian's work on the fourfold way. And I really love how we can use all of these archetypes to really tap into a different kind of leadership. So I know that, you know, we've got here the warrior, the healer, the visionary, and the teacher. I know most of us will probably see the warrior archetype as the one that's most associated with leadership, because as we'll start to see, this archetype is the one that's most connected to power and action, and what many of us consider leadership qualities or primary leadership qualities. But if we're going to reimagine leadership and heal unhealthy, fragmented, and dysfunctional or toxic workplaces and communities, and take leadership into a new age, then we can also draw on the qualities of the healer, the visionary, and the teacher to provide a new framework for leading that anyone can embody, right? So I think many of us might shy away from being leaders because we can't see ourselves as fighters or warriors, but we might consider stepping up, say, if we first imagine tapping into the essence of the archetypes to motivate us and eventually live out. So we can also recognize pre-existing qualities that we have that are more natural to us, and then embody these other essential qualities as well. So I really, so this little kind of circular kind of symbol that I have here with all of those archetypes there, you can imagine that this is also like a bit of a wheel or a dial, and that they all work together, and that sometimes one might be more forward than the other, but because they're all together, they're all influencing each other. So it's not just about one being there, it's about all of them working together in combination, I suppose. And I've got this lovely image of a faceted stone that I think we can connect to as well when we think about, you know, the archetypes, because, you know, they're energy-filled images that we all can tap into. So they kind of all exist in us as potential, and that, you know, we might sort of project one more than the other. So that's what's reflecting forward now. But we are multifaceted and multi-talented and have the potential for more. So it may be just about turning that stone a little to one side, or turning it around or upside down, so that another facet of ourselves can be reflected back, right? So we want leadership to be complex in that way, not complicated, right? Just complex. So hold this image in mind of this kind of multifaceted stone, or that wheel, if the wheel with the warrior, the visionary, the teacher, and the healer feel more helpful for you. And we're going to do a little quiz that I'd love you all to try out. And I think, Roz, if you're ready, you can pop that quiz up as well. So I want you to think, you know, intuitively, which archetype is expressed most within you, just intuitively. So we haven't gone through it obviously at this point, but what archetype seems to resonate or seems to be sparked most in you, or is your more dominant style, or is a strength for you? So just select one. Is it the warrior, the healer, the visionary, or the teacher? And you might have more than one, but see if you can kind of just, you know, think about which one seems the most comfortable, or the biggest strength for me. And
I'll
I also invite you
a few more seconds, but people's responses are coming through, so I'll be able to read them out shortly.
Great. And, you know, I know that people might have more than one, so you can always, if you feel like it, you can always pop that into the chat. And just after you've responded, also just off the cuff, just, you know, when it comes to the ideals or ideas of leadership within your community at work, which qualities do you think or feel are lacking or undeveloped within yourself as well? So you can just hold that in mind, because we're going to go through shortly.
I'll just
talk about each one in turn.
The poll, and our results are 24% of people identify with warrior, 32% identify with healer, 6% identify as visionary, and 38% is the top one. People identify as teacher.
As a teacher, how interesting, right? I don't know. Does everyone else find that interesting? Especially like the visionary, like that's interesting. So this is so they're kind of equal, right? The warrior, the healer, the teacher, more or less, although the teacher is sort of more up there. And I suppose we can think of those aspects that you are really identifying as dominant, you know, they're your strengths, right? And so if anything is left, it may be those are the ones that I can start to work on and use my strengths to sort of help develop. All right, so thank you so much, everybody, for popping that in. I hope that quiz was fun for you. But another little bit of play now, before we go on. I have put together a bit of a collage of leaders in contemporary culture. Obviously, some of these people are no longer with us, they're dead. But I think most of us would know most of these people, I'm hoping, but I'm just going to talk about each one. And I want you to think about as I go through, so they're all leaders, and I would say more or less they're inspiring in some way, but they are, I think they all came to leadership with a different strength, either the warrior, the healer, the visionary, or the teacher. So I'm just going to name them all. And I don't think I've made it too difficult. I think some are more obvious than others, but I think most of them also carry more than one, probably more than two of those archetypes as well. So we have Thich Nhat Hanh in the top corner, a Buddhist monk exiled from Vietnam to France. We have Princess Diana. We have Oprah, Up the top there, we have an image of Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, and we have Yoda from Star Wars. This is Rosie Batty down at the bottom, Steve Jobs, and Lady Gaga. And for those fast typers there, if you want to throw down who you think belongs where, that'd be really fun. But I'm just going to talk to it now, and you can agree with me or not, so that's okay. But I've put Thich Nhat Hanh and Princess Diana together as leaders who are primarily healers. So they are heart-led, but they've also got qualities of definitely warriors and visionaries as well. And Thich Nhat Hanh in particular, teachers. I've got a question mark about Princess Diana as a teacher, but I would suspect she embodies that as well. I have now Oprah and Rosie Batty as warriors. And I would say they both have those other qualities of being teachers and healers as well, and visionaries, particularly Oprah as a visionary. I'm not sure about Rosie. And then on the side, we have, you know, the two wise old men, the teachers. So the wise old man archetype is connected to the teacher archetype, and as is the wise old woman archetype. But little kind of fun fact, I suppose, is that when I was looking for images of wise old women, it was always in the shadow element. It was always in the negative connotation of witch or crone, and which is interesting, right? But anyway, so both Gandalf and Yoda, I think, are teachers, but they are also warriors, they are also visionaries, and they are also healers. And then at the bottom, we have both of these people, incredible visionaries. They see the world and see things in the world that other people could not imagine seeing, right? And I'm not sure about Jobs. He's definitely a warrior, both definitely warriors. But Gaga, for sure, a healer. I know that, particularly with you know, youth disenfranchised and youth that feel like outsiders and they don't belong. I know that she did a lot of healing just through being herself, right? So that was kind of fun, right? And I suppose, like I said, you don't have to agree with me, and it could be a fun little discussion point as well, you know, as a group, and maybe you can create your own little collages at the end as well. After we finish the talk, it can be a little fun little creative project for you all, and be interested to see what other people thought as well. Okay, so we're going to go right now into this, I suppose, the body of the talk today, and this is about talking about each of those warriors, archetypes that can contribute to becoming new kinds of leaders. So the warrior archetype is about strength and power. So what I'd like you to do as we go through each one is cultivate an image of warrior within you and feel it in your body and mind. And you can just listen to me, you can close your eyes as you cultivate this image of what is a warrior, right? So warriors are about showing up and being present. Warriors take a stand, they take action, and they're willing, right? So they have will, they're willing, and they're not afraid of power. You'll see them as being courageous and strong and focused. Warriors have healthy boundaries, they are loyal and empowering and inspiring in how they speak and do. Now, the shadow aspects of the warrior is usually about, or you can sort of think about it as being over, under, or having a misdirected use of power. And this means that you might see a warrior in shadow as being cruel or blunt or disassociated from what they're doing. Generally, it's about disempowerment or blaming or even being a victim. So it's about feeling maybe disempowered yourself. There's a bit of that tit for tat, I should say, or deceit, and being rebellious and competitive just for the sake of being rebellious and competitive, or being invisible, so completely sort of checking out. Now, the warrior, you can think of the warrior as being the strong back to the soft front of the healer. Okay. And so next, I'm going to sort of put forward a whole bunch of questions. And the reason I'm kind of doing this is so that you can kind of think creatively about how the warrior might be able to be embodied within your daily life. So I don't think, giving you this is what a warrior will look like. Is like, I'm going to ask these questions and I want you to live them. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what I mean by living the questions in a moment. But let's just go through each of these questions. You don't need to answer them all. So just imagine these questions just sitting there, and the ones that feel important and relevant to you are going to spark something within you. It may be a little tension, a little excitement, even a little discomfort. So as I read out each question, just kind of highlight the ones that seem to maybe be useful or helpful for you in some way, because they kind of activate something within you. Okay. So when it comes to the issues I care about at work, in what ways am I resisting, avoiding, hiding, or holding back engaging with these issues? Or in what way might I be forcing, competing, or harming in my pursuit of this issue? So just sitting with that. And what would it look and feel like to consciously take a stand on this issue, even in a small way? Yeah. What is my relationship to power and self-worth, and where do I lose my power? Just letting that sit. And what happens when unexpected and surprising events happen? Am I able to stay centered, or do I get knocked off balance? Okay, and this is can be a really helpful one. So who are the people or beings who have inspired me, who embody the warrior as a way to lead? And these can be historic beings and people, or contemporary or fictional characters. And how do their qualities mirror my own? And how can I reinforce or express these? So this is really tapping into the idea of that someone is inspiring you through their warrior energy, then this is merely a reflection of what's already existing within you. And it becomes about being creative, or tapping into that archetypal energy of courage and strength to try and embody that yourself. And then I really love this question as well, because it really highlights that. How have I faced challenges in the past with the strength, courage, and power of the warrior? And how am I, or can I, demonstrate these now? Okay, so we're just living those questions, and if anyone has any one of those questions has sparked an interest in you, just put it to one side, and you can promise yourself to come back to it. But I just want to tell you a little bit what I mean by live the questions, because I'm going to be asking this of each archetype. And so we're doing this to find out the answers. So when you live the questions, it's not about having the answers and then doing it. It's about going, well, I wonder what would happen if I tried this, or this is interesting or curious. I wonder what that's about, and how about I go and try and explore that experiment. So when you live the questions in this way, it just inherently starts to embody those qualities of leadership. So being courageous, where you don't need to have a definitive plan or a known outcome or a predetermined structure, and that goes against everything that we're told is the right way to do things at work, right? It's like we need a plan and we need to know what's going to happen before we try. But I'm saying no, or the warrior doesn't do that anyway. Creative, so write your own life, so when you're kind of just living the questions, it means, I'm carving my own path here. So this is a new narrative that you can live by. You're being curious, so you're not attached to the outcome, which can be really restrictive. You're finding out what the outcome might be. And it's also caring, that you're connected to being open-hearted with yourself and others. Okay. And I love this quote by Rilke about living the question. Okay, he says, be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given you, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. Okay. And the little footsteps in the deserty sand, I think really nicely goes with that quote. Okay, everyone take a breather if you wish, if you need it. So I'm just going to continue a little bit with the warrior after that little side bar. And as you see, I've got this lion image here who can embody that warrior archetype as well in animal form. And maybe you have a different image or a symbol that you can use to help embody. But I've got some suggestions here for what you can do. Now, I really want you to trust yourself. So if you come up with an image and you have a feeling and you start to say, how can I embody the warrior, and something comes to you, I would just go with that. But you know, here are some things maybe that you can try or help you along. So any standing or standing meditation practice is a practice that can help you tap into that archetypal energy of the warrior. Any breath work that is activating, so that dial up. So if you're going to turn that dial up towards the top end, you know, more towards the 70, 80 mark, then we are activating that kind of energy or power that the warrior archetype has. Spending time in nature helps warriors anchor and plug in, so we don't sort of lose a sense of, you know, who we are and, you know, how we use our power. And any practices that help you build physical strength and agility. So I've made some suggestions here, but you might have your own. Breath work, particular types of breath work, yoga, Pilates, doing weights, running, qigong, dance even. So warriors also learn how to, you know, use their boundaries. So boundary work and defining your boundaries is good practice to embody the warrior archetype, and taking a risk every day. So doing something that puts you right at the edge of your window of tolerance, but not too far over your edge where you become overwhelmed. And I know that something risky to one person may not be risky to another. So you really sort of work out what it is it that I'm avoiding, right? Or what is it that I find really scary that I can start to do a little bit of, right? So you start to take a little bit of that medicine of fear, yeah? Okay. All right, let's just take a moment here and breathe. I mean, I certainly need to take a breather, but before we move on to the healer, and just let that integrate and settle within you, particularly those of you who are starting to have a sense that I could use more of that warrior archetype, you know, in my workplace to embody a new kind of leadership. Okay, so the healer archetype, you know, is about heart and meaning. So now, if we can switch a little bit, turn that wheel around or shift that little stone so it's reflecting forward differently, and cultivate an image of the healer and feel it in your body and mind. And let it settle in as I'm talking. You can close your eyes to really feel it. So healers tend to what has heart and meaning, and this is important, they transform pain and suffering. So they have the capacity to transform that. So, you know, when you're thinking about what's sick or unwell in your workplace, healers know how to shift that, okay? They operate from an open-heartedness, which includes those high vibe emotions of compassion, acceptance, love, gratitude, and trust. Healers can be seen to be empathetic, authentic, vulnerable, non-judgmental, and reciprocal. So this isn't just about giving all of that, you know, love out. This is about receiving it as well. And they know that that's a necessity. You know, they are open-hearted. It goes in both directions. So in shadow, healers may be seen as indifferent. You know, it's like, oh, I can't look at that. I'm not going to look at that. So I'm just going to numb out. Or self-sacrificing and martyrs. So it's all about giving it out and they suffer. Naivety. So this is about being too open without any wisdom. Or love is given conditionally. Or it's more about perfection, you know, it's and striving. So this is about really being kind of harsh, even cruel to self. Or this idea that I can heal anything. You know, I know a few healers out there who think that, you know, give them anything and they can fix it. So when I'm talking about healers, I think we can quickly flip to, you know, doctors or nurses or therapists as well, but anyone can be a healer, as we saw in that collage before. And I think many of you are lawyers. Lawyers can be healers too. Architects can be healers too. Builders can be healers too. And this is because, healers just recognize there's a soul in everything, and they provide that bridge between, self and the outside world, or between people and between things, between cultures, between organizations. Okay. And so it's that other side of the warrior too. So it's a soft front to the strong back of the warrior. That's why we need all of these archetypes together, right? They all have something to support and offer the other. And so if we're going to live the questions to help us embody the healer, these are some things to be curious about. So what is a personal hurt, wound, or trauma story about my life that I repeat or share? Okay, so what are things that are hurt within me that I tell others? And then let's take it to the workplace. What is a workplace hurt, wound, or trauma story that is repeated or shared often, either by myself or others or the collective, So what is the grievance story at work that can tell you a lot about where work is hurt? So at work, what gets in my way of giving care, compassion, and love and receiving it? Okay, so it's interesting to talk about love in the work context, right? So I think it's a good question. And what needs healing in my workplace? If I can step back, what's unwell? And if I don't know, I wonder if I could find out, what is at the heart of the sickness here? And who are the people, beings who have inspired me, who embody the healer as a way to lead? Historic, contemporary, or fictional characters? And how do their qualities mirror mine, and how can I reinforce and express these? So if the healer archetype doesn't come naturally to you, finding inspiration, or who is inspiring to you that embodies these characters, and what are those characteristics? And these are merely reflections of what already exists inside you. I know I've said that already, but I'm going to keep repeating it. Okay. And so if we were to think about how we can embody the healer archetype, like I said before, if you're connecting to this archetypal energy and intuitively there's a sense, oh, okay, I can do more of this in my life, then please follow that intuition. But I've got some suggestions here. So healers tell stories, and they can help tell stories and dialogues for healing. So I know that a lot of you hear really difficult stories, and I suppose healing can be a way to, how do I transform those difficult stories in a way that heals, right? So appreciative inquiry and resilience narratives can really help healing, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next 2 slides. But any heart-based practices are inherently healing, and the simple act of putting one hand to your heart, for instance, and if everyone wants to try that and give yourself some time to just let that integrate, can be a beautiful healing practice in and of its own that you can do anywhere. But also compassion-based practices and gratitude practices are heart-based. Any nurturing body work, and this can be literally massage or going to acupuncture or body healing, but also just taking yourself to the doctor or making sure you get your dental checkup every year, those sorts of things. Spending time in nature can be very nourishing to the healer, as is boundary work. Boundary work is very important for healers so that you don't become depleted and burnt out. Okay, and lying down meditations are very healing. So I probably identify more with the healer archetype. So I love lying down. I love lounging about, and I find that very healing. But I mean, more formally, this can be guided body scans and practices like yoga nidra. Okay. So just a little bit more about how appreciative inquiry can help us embody the healer. And this is about really transforming how we communicate and how we tell stories to each other. And we can do appreciative inquiry with yourself, or in relationship to another person, or within a whole situation or group. We can do that with a whole sort of work culture situation. And this is where we're really affirming the skills and the abilities and the character of ourselves or others or the situation that is good and that is already working, and that these are identifiable strengths, right, that can be used to address weaknesses, say. And so you want to highlight qualities about yourself or others, or resources or successes and achievements as well. And what this can do is, when we're not just criticizing or saying what's wrong, when we're sort of saying, I really like this about what you do, and I really can't believe that you're able to do these things, they're amazing. It really generates greater vitality and enthusiasm in conversations, especially conversations that are about healing things that are toxic or unwell. One thing about appreciative inquiry, though, is that we do have to be careful about being overly idealistic, I should say, or naive. So, definitely we need to know what we appreciate and what we value, but we also need to know that there are certainly some things that we don't appreciate and aren't acceptable. So that's that. I can hold the need for change and radical acceptance at the same time. And then resilience or restorative narratives are where we retell stories that reflect strength, courage, compassion, and resilience. So, like I said, as a therapist and as lawyers, and even as people who are support staff at where you are working, you would be hearing and witnessing, very difficult moments in people's lives. And it can be very challenging to the psyche and to the soul to constantly be exposed to that. So if we're able to validate people's hurt experiences and then rewrite all that story going forward. So this is about, okay, this thing happened and it was horrible, but this is what I've learned, and this is how I'm going to be going forward. And we have to be careful not to rush that process. So letting people and ourselves come to it in our own time, but really starting to really acknowledge, people's resilience in those situations and your own resilience in those situations, and talk about them in peer support. So rather than just repeating the traumatic stories, which can be vicariously traumatizing, we are saying this thing happened, but this is how I'm kind of healing from it, right? And really sort of sharing how you've been personally changed by engaging in the work that you're doing with your clients or with your colleagues. Okay, and I've got here a tree of life metaphor. If people want to look that up, it's actually a beautiful way to visually sort of talk about, how we've moved from trauma to restoration as well. Okay, so I've just got this little image up here to remind me to take a breath and get everybody else to maybe just take a moment and integrate the information so far. If people want to write some comments or put some questions up at this point, please do that. In past workshops, I have read everybody's comments and everybody's questions, and I really take them on. I really value people's feedback. So, and I think by going by the clock, I think we're going to have time to explore some questions and do a little bit of deeper kind of inquiry. So let's just take a moment. I love these images. Okay. So we're going to move on now to the visionary. So the visionary is about imagination and ideas. And this is going to be an interesting one because it was the one, right, that people didn't connect with as a strength so much. So let's make a little time here. So cultivate an image of a visionary, right? And feel it in your body and mind. So visionaries have the capacity to really, or have heightened vision, imagination, and intuition. And what this means is that they can see beyond what seems possible, and for the benefit of all generally. So this typically, in terms of leadership, isn't about being self-serving. This is about, I can see something that can benefit, you know, the world soul. Okay. And this is also, visionaries also live really creatively based off a life dream. So it may be that they had a sense of something, or they have a glimmer of something, that I'm supposed to do this, or I'm supposed to put some time in this, or, you know, given the opportunity, I want to spend more time doing this. And it really answers the question, why am I here? So visionaries are authentic, they're truthful, they're insightful and highly perceptive, and they bring voice to what they see or what you see, and they express original ideas. So they're not about following somebody else or doing what other people want them to do. So this can happen in shadow. So where you're pretending, it's like, oh, somebody else said I'm good at that, so okay, I'll just do that. Or bravado. So this is being a little bit overpowered as a visionary, you know, trying too hard. But it's also about self-abandonment. It's about, oh, I can't do that. There's no possibility that I could do that, so I'm just not going to try. And projection. So, and I suppose that's a little bit like, I'm going to project what on somebody else, what I think that they should be doing or thinking or perceiving. So this is about being a little bit forceful about putting your ideas on other people. Hopefully people are getting a sense of a visionary here, and now how we might be able to embody the visionary. So if this is an area where you're going, actually, I don't really feel connected to this archetypal energy, I don't have that visionary energy, seeing how these questions kind of hit with you, let's pay special attention to that. So live these questions, okay? So which issues at work seem stuck or fixed? You know, there's this dialogue, this is just the way it is, or this is how it's always been. And that's like a very fixed way of seeing and doing. So ask, how might I flip or expand or take a broader or higher perspective on these issues? And let that sit. Where am I withholding my own truth and authenticity to keep peace or to ensure acceptance? Right. Where am I holding back? Because if I were to not hold back, that would be unacceptable. So when and with whom is it easy to be myself and express my thoughts, ideas, and truth? Maybe it's easier to be a visionary with some people and not others, right? So letting that sit. And who are the people or beings who have inspired me, who embody the visionary? And as a way to lead, I should say. So these can be historic, contemporary, or fictional characters. And how do their qualities mirror mine? And how can I reinforce or express these? So if you felt it a little hard to connect to the visionary, then really allowing that inspiration to kind of come to you or sort of sit within you, because these are merely reflections of you. Okay, you have these qualities. It's just a matter of how will these qualities be expressed through me. Okay, so this isn't about copying anybody. This is about being yourself and expressing your original ideas, your original vision. Okay, and we need that as leaders, right? You know, especially if something's toxic or sick, it does imply that something's probably been unwell for a little while, and we need new ideas around this, new ways of thinking about it. And this is the visionary. Okay, so here we have beautiful eagle who, you know, how high can they fly? They can see, you know, past, present, and future. They can see, you know, higher than anything else, you know. Even when I think about that, it kind of makes me quite relaxed, right? This, you know, imagine, you know, we've sometimes, many of you have probably hiked, you know, high mountains and stood on the peaks and taken a look out and gone, oh, you know, my problems don't seem so bad from up here. Or looked up into the sky and gone, oh my gosh, the world is so huge and immense, and I'm just this little speck. You know, there's so much more out there than what I can imagine. Can I extend my vision. So one way to embody the visionary archetype is to pay attention to dreams and symbolisms and synchronicity. So this is, you know, visual kind of thinking. And these things, and daydreams as well. So not fantasy, more daydreams, dreams, symbolism. These can give us guidance about what needs work and attention, and really give us new ideas. If we can start to learn and value the symbolism there and interpret it. To embody the visionary archetype, paying more attention to your intuition is important. So that's just that kind of like, oh, I know something, but I can't prove it. You know, I just know it. I have a sense, you know, that gut feeling. Prioritize creativity in your life, and enjoy play and spontaneity and humor. And when I say creativity, I don't mean formal art, although it can be painting, it can be making music, but it could also be, you know, baking, or, you know, repairing clothes, or gardening, or even the way that you dress, you know, how you present yourself out in the world. So this is about risking expressing your ideas. And I just put in there in brackets with discernment, because I think what happens, we all have that quality of being visionary, but what's happened is we've been told that actually that's a stupid idea, or that would never work, or that's not possible, right? And so we've learned to really shut that down. And so the visionary archetype is, you know, in that dark, kind of the darkest corner of that little, you know, reflective and multifaceted gem. So when we start to kind of share our ideas with people who we really trust aren't going to cut us down and cut us off, that can really start to enhance our capacity to be more visionary and have that energy. Okay, and this is the last one. So this is the archetype of the teacher, who's about wisdom and guidance. So let's take a breath here. Maybe we're switching from visionary to teacher now. So when you think of teacher, the energy of a teacher, cultivate an image and feel it in your body and mind. Okay, and so the teacher is about developing wisdom, being observant and objective and open to outcomes. So the teacher is willing to try out new things in the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom. Okay, so they'll test things out, they'll experiment, and they trust not knowing. So the teacher is really about waiting and asking questions and listening and learning and evaluating, you know, the outcomes without attachment. So they're not going, I want this to happen and I'm going to make it happen. It's like, okay, so I have a question about this and I'm going to see what happens when I try some things out. The teacher is also about clarity. So getting clear so that they can make good choices. And so timing is important to the teacher. So this is about really discerning how they step forward and when they speak. And the teachers also pass on wisdom. So this isn't just about gathering wisdom and holding onto it greedily. This is about going, you know, what have I learned through observation and listening and objective choices, and how can I share that with others? So in shadow, the teacher can be stuck in being a student, you know, so always learning but never sharing. But they can also be righteous and judgmental. So it's like, this is what I've learned and this is the way it has to be. The shadow teacher can be ignorant, so not wanting to learn some aspects, particularly if it might go against what you feel like you know. Confusion can be a shadow energy or shadow quality of the teacher. So little, you know, not being able to put some things together. And like I said, not sharing knowledge and maintaining control. So if we can live some of these questions to help us embody more of that teacher archetype, I'm going to ask, you know, who have been the important teachers in my life and what qualities did they possess and share that inspired me? And teachers can be literally the teachers that you had at school, you know, that the profession of a teacher. But a teacher may be your neighbor, or a conversation that you had with a stranger even, or, you know, an important mentor at work, or a friend. You know, maybe you have a wise teacher friend who you really value their capacity to share their wisdom. And so what is my relationship to silence, listening and not speaking. Okay, let that sit with you. And how might saying less and listening more help in a toxic situation at work? Let that sit with you. And so, what is my relationship to patience, waiting, watching, and responding with good timing? Do I make decisions when I'm confused and I don't have all or enough information? Or do I react before having enough information? Let that sit. I think sometimes we are pressured to do that, right? Especially on timelines, deadlines. So just notice. So this is all non-judgment. You know, we're not being harsh with ourselves. We're not being critical of ourselves. We're just being truthful. How can I begin to share what I've learned or know with my community? Okay, so I don't have to know everything. How can I start to share something? Maybe you can share something that you learned today, right, with somebody who can't attend or wasn't able to attend. And this last question, who are the people or beings who have inspired me, who embody the teacher as a way to lead? Again, historic, contemporary, or fictional characters, and how do their qualities mirror mine? Remember, this archetypal energy, we have access to it, we all do. And so if someone inspires you of that teacher archetype and that kind of ignites something in you, it is merely reflecting or suggesting what's already within you. And how can I express these? Okay. And so if we were to embody the wisdom and guidance of the teacher archetype, we can do this through practicing deep listening. And I'll talk about that in the next slide, to promote dialogue and conversation. Sitting meditations can help, you know, be the sage or the wise teacher. Breath work that is more dialed down. So we're going deep, we're going quiet, we're listening, we're being discerning. So, you know, more on that lower end of the window of tolerance into relaxation and stillness. And I've got here alternate nostril breathing for those of you who are familiar with that practice. And these last two suggestions, actually, I pulled straight from Angeles Arian's book. And I just love it, and I'm actually going to do this. Spend one full day each month in total silence, and this helps us connect to our inner guidance, and I would also say visionary. Spend one full day each month in total silence. And I know that may be hard for a lot of people, but, you know, if we go, you know, one Sunday a month from 9 till 3, I'm just, you know, as much as I can, no phone, no contact, silence. If once a month is too much, once every 3 months, hey. And on your birthday each month, do something you haven't done before out of curiosity. You know, it's like, I'm just going to try this and learn how to approach the unknown. So teachers, remember, don't mind stepping into unknown territory. They want to learn. And so if you do that once a month, 12 times a year, you're learning something new, okay? Really outside of your comfort zone. Okay, so, and just this last little bit about deep listening, okay? So deep listening in communication can be with yourself, with partners, or with groups. And it can be done formally or informally. So this is, deep listeners are mindful and empathetic in how they listen and they speak. And this is about really, 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 emphasizing really, really hearing yourself and really hearing others. And where you're really practicing observation and non-reactivity, and you're really releasing your own agenda. So, you know, we all come with an agenda or opinion or ideas, but when we're deep listening, we're really holding those so that we can hear what's happening with the other person or the other members of the group. And when you're in deep listening mode, there is no interruption. There are no questions, debating, or discussion. You're really letting the other person or the other parties speak their truth or speak it all out with lots of pauses and lots of space, so that you know, there's an encouragement to continue speaking and you can continue listening. So it's patient, right? And it's slow, and it really may go against, you know, our strict timelines that we have about resolving issues and problems. But it's really important that we allow time for this so that everybody can be heard, and that we can really allow for differences and contradictory perspectives to come forward. And incidentally, this is stretching our capacity down at the bottom of our window to be really still and calm and quiet. And it really puts us in a different state of mind. You know, if you've practiced deep listening, it can put us in almost like a meditative state, and help us access, you know, new knowledge and new wisdom even within ourselves, and in connection to other people. Okay, so this is another little kind of, you know, keep a slide here just to help us take a breather before I finish up. I'm going to try and finish up a little quickly so that we can have more time to speak, but I love these sort of chatres, labyrinths. If anyone has ever walked one, they can be very meditative as well. And take a breath, let everything integrate. So far, I know I've given you lots of information. And I want to just end with this quiz. So, Ros, if you want to pop the next quiz up. So, you know, which archetypal energy, so when it comes to this new type of leadership, which archetypal energy can I draw on and embody to support me bringing this forward? So warrior, healer, visionary, or teacher. And if you want, you can just type into the chat as well, if it's feels better for you that way. Keeping that wheel in mind, or that multifaceted stone, you know, which little facet are you going to bring forward? Yeah.
I'll just give a few more seconds before I close it off, but it looks like people are putting their responses in.
Fantastic.
Okay, our results are 5% warrior, 18% healer, 32% visionary, and 45% teacher.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I have to say that's really unexpected. And it says something about this cohort. I mean, there's a lot of power within the cohort, I think, and a lot of you know, amazing qualities. Like I'm really excited. I want people to tell their stories about this. Like, I would love people to email me and tell me like how this little kind of experiment of archetypal energy goes in terms of their, you know, this new age of leadership. I would love that. You know, as I was doing this talk today, I definitely identify with a healer, definitely, and visionary mostly. Teacher, I think is I'm building that, but I definitely am no warrior, and so I was bringing warrior energy into this this talk today. So just to know that I'm walking the talk here. So I really appreciate everybody's really engagement here. Okay, so I'm going to finish up, and I'm going to try and finish up quickly because we've only got a few more minutes for questions. I'm happy to stay longer, but I know people want to go. So this is a bit of a summary. So in this new age, we need a creative framework for leadership, right? And this is why I thought this archetypal energy framework could be more helpful, because we just have to find the image, right? You don't have to remember anything. You just have to kind of tap into that energy that's already here for every single one of us, and just go with that. And this is going to help us navigate the complexities of strained and unhealthy workplaces. So I'm not in your workplaces to kind of tell you how to do it. You are in your workplaces. You know, that's your context, and you will know what to do about that if you are given the opportunity. So we want to connect not just our own individual souls, we will want to sort of see how the world soul and our own souls cannot be separated. So we continue to build and expand our personal resources to support and strengthen body, mind, and spirit, but also how we fit into the context of our lived environments, both close and far from us. We want to engage a new mind and a new way of thinking that really values imagination, mind, body, spirit, and soul, and have access, or really sort of say that we can access this power of archetypal imagination anywhere. And Hollis, little quote here. And so we want to do that to relinquish outmoded identities, yeah, of badly behaved leaders and defenses, and to risk a radical reimagining of the larger possibilities of the world and of the self. And so just to finish, and sort of take you beyond this talk today, you know, remembering that we can access this at any time, and that you might want to even set a daily intention, you know, that sort of just, you know, where you just live the question, how will I embody this archetype today? Okay. And then we live that question with curiosity and with courage and with caring. And if you could name and maybe type into the chat, you don't have to type it in, but really just identify one helpful thing from today's talk that you could contemplate, share with other people, use or try. You know, sort of, it's almost like a little commitment to yourself to just pull something from today that could be useful, and yeah, put it in the chat if you can. And then what are 3 small, doable and realistic actions I can take to embody this archetype that you've identified to bring leadership into your workplace? And you might want to take a little bit of time for that. But if you've got a bit of time after this talk, you know, just write down a few things that you can start to do, whether it's today, tomorrow, next week, and just begin, okay? And that's it. Let me take it back to this little image here as we finish. Ros, do we have time for questions, or maybe read out people's comments, or have I left it a little too fine today again?
We've still got a few more minutes if people would like to pop things into the question box or into the chat. I think people found the archetyping an interesting exercise, that it is, they're such universal types of identities that can be very easily tapped into. I think while I'm just seeing whether people would like to ask other questions, I think the thing that occurred to me is, I know that we do have some lawyers that are in the webinar, and you know, as community lawyers, we very much pride ourselves on being strong advocates for our communities, and yet the warrior energy wasn't quite as high as I thought it would be. So maybe if we asked a different group of lawyers, we might have got a different response.
Yeah, I mean, but that's part of, you know, there's that diverse community, and I would say that you are, you know, just by being advocates, I think that makes you warriors, but perhaps it's, you know, that feeling of I'm not, like, I don't think I can do this, and really supporting yourself with those other archetypes to be more of the warrior. I mean, I totally identify with that. It's like, no, I'm not that kind of person, is what I say, you know, to myself. And it's like, well, what if I did? I wonder how that would change my circumstances. And I suppose, you know, in that little collage, you know, I don't think, you know, actually, I was trying to find a free image of Grace Tame, to be honest. I could not find a free image, but Rosie Batty, just as wonderful, and, you know, a representation of warrior. But I don't know if either of those people would consider themselves warriors, right? But they're definitely embodying those archetypes now, you know, as well as healer and being visionaries and teachers as well. So I think sometimes we just tap in because we must. And I think if your workplace, and I know that a lot of people value the community work that you're doing. So, you know, it's like, how can I invest more soul into my workplace by really changing the way that I engage in it? And I may have to just, you know, tap into being a warrior. I may just have to really try and expand my vision and come up with some new ideas. I may have to just be quiet for a little while and listen so I can hear other people's opinions. And I may need to really balance out how I'm doing my healing work here, because I would say there's a lot of healers in there too. I think that came out in the questioning. Oh.
Well, I think that's come to time, and I think, Mandy, you've given us all a great deal to think about and reflect on. So thank you again so much for your time and expertise, and thanks to our attendees who have hung in there for a slightly longer.
I know,
but I think it's worth the time, the investment. Before you go, I'll just remind people to complete the feedback survey that will pop up on your screen.
Please do that.
Webinar's closed.
Yes.
It's really important that we get that feedback to just make sure we're hitting the mark with our webinar program.
Yes.
And as always, we hope to see you back here for a CLCQ webinar very soon. So bye for now, everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks, Roz.